All right, sorry about that. Thank you everyone who has been watching us so far, or if you're continuing watching us, thank you so much for staying with us. Um, okay, we're just going to start some. Hi again.
Hello again.
Thank you very much for being patient. All right,
My
go ahead
pleasure.
and continue. I'm sorry I had to cut you off.
Yes, so the issue of diversity and inclusion and racism, and well, frankly, white supremacy. I mean, it, it's something I've had so many conversations with the last year or two with various colleagues and friends, and um, it's an issue that a lot of people become angry about even mentioning. I had an experience, I guess, about a year or two ago. Can't remember exactly, but down in Florida, I was contacted by somebody who ran a chamber music um, society in, I think, Palm Beach, somewhere on the east coast of Florida, and I'm in the Naples area, on the west coast. And he'd seen my LinkedIn profile and some of my work, and said he was impressed, and he was very interested in speaking to me because he was going to start maybe working with an organization and on a project in the Naples area, and he thought that I might be the right person to get involved. So he invited me to join him in attending a concert when he was in the area, and then afterward invited me to go out and just grab a drink and talk shop and tell me more about his project and potentially hiring me for it. So everything went very well, and we were maybe 20 minutes into our discussion at the bar about his project and possibly engaging me and what my thoughts were on it. And he brought up my social justice concerts and how I'd been, addressing some of these issues, and he wanted to do some educational outreach. And I said that that's wonderful, and I'd certainly like to do this. And of course, we need to develop new audiences. And he liked what I had to say about getting younger people involved and doing more involved community outreach and educational outreach. And then I happened to mention offhand that, as part of this, of course, I'd like to be able to address the issue of racism in classical music, because that would be part of the next step of building new audiences and new generations of young musicians. And his whole demeanor changed. Stopped smiling, face fell, body stiffened, sort of pulled back a little bit. And he told me in a very terse voice that, well, if I wanted to do that, well, that was going to have to be, my crusade. I was going to have to commit myself to just that. And then suddenly he had to get ready for some other things. And, thanks so much for joining him. And, we'd be in touch. And, he was staying, but he insisted that I leave. And I didn't really register the complete change in demeanor until I was out the door, and I went, "Oh my goodness!" And he didn't contact me after that. I emailed him to follow up. I didn't mention that part of the conversation. Just let that go. And yeah, there was nothing from him after that. And that, in my experience, is what happens when you talk to people who have some power,
Yeah.
um, including the power to address these things, let alone change them. It becomes a non-starter. And the excuses I hear range from there is no racism, it's a meritocracy. If you're talented and hardworking, then you'll find the opportunities, to,
Which you
the
have.
more sinister, well, you're just looking for excuses, you're just looking for problems. I have a black friend
Mhm.
and I treat them nicely, so how can you be saying that this exists? And, um, it becomes exhausting. People like to shout very quickly. In the US, there are a number of diversity initiatives with orchestras, some of the major orchestras, in which they're usually African American fellowships. Some are African American and Latino, but mostly African American. And these fellowships range from, the fellow being able to attend rehearsals 3 times a year to the fellow playing as a full-time member of the orchestra. And they're competitive, and they usually, from my understanding, they often pay less than what everybody else in the orchestra makes, of course, because they're fellow positions and not part of the orchestra's regular roster. And unfortunately, despite these fellowships having existed for over 40 years at this point, they have not done a whole lot to move the needle. There are only a couple of African American or Latino musicians who hold principal jobs with major orchestras. Most orchestras only have between 3 and 5% Black and Hispanic combined membership. There has never been a Black or American-born Hispanic conductor to hold the position of music director with a major orchestra. So these are institutional problems. Again, we've seen a lot of superfluous, perfunctory messages of, anti-racism put out by performing arts organizations, classical music institutions the last few days. And quite a few of them, I'm sad to say, only sort of speak in broad general terms against racism. And of course, we should eradicate racism against anybody. It has no place in the world, and I'm not saying that, if I see racism against somebody who is Asian or Native American or so on and so forth, that it's not a bad thing. Of course, it's a bad thing. But the unique institution in the United States is against African Americans. The police brutality we see viscerally on the streets is against African Americans. The pseudoscience that has been pushed has been against African Americans. So, in this moment, we need organizations to step up and say, stop anti-Black white supremacy, anti-Black violence. Of course we care about everybody else. But in this moment, this is the problem we need to address. And this is the one that is costing lives on the streets and keeping a lot of people out of wonderful opportunities. And on top of that, if you look like me in the United States, somebody else gets to determine whether or not you are Black or Hispanic or anything else. Even if you're half Black, half white. If you're half Black, no, you're Black. So identity is determined externally, which leaves a person no room to say, but, there are other parts of me too. It gives people another form of power over, over your identity, your body, everything. And yeah, it's a problem that's just not really being addressed the way it needs to be. And there have been a handful of organizations that have said specifically, we are standing against anti-Black racism and white supremacy, and we want to talk about the problem, not the reaction to the problem. But those institutions and individuals are right now in the minority. So,
and these are talk. By the time the talk turns into action, it is going to take another half a century, maybe.
Yes. Well, what I would like to see right now, and I hate tokenism, and unfortunately, there's a lot of tokenism that gets brought into this. So it's an enormously complex problem, and that's fine. Complexity should be dealt with. There are ways to work within and around complexity. So that's not a problem. It just has to be acknowledged. This is not a simple black and white issue. But what I would love to see from organizations, and keeping in mind that, as I mentioned earlier, sexism in classical music has long been a problem. In conducting, it has been a visceral, open problem for generations. It really wasn't until the last 10 or 15 years when Marilyn Alsop finally broke through and got her due and was the first woman to hold the post of music director and conductor with a major American orchestra when she got the Baltimore Symphony job, that she had the platform and the power to say, see racism as a problem. It took me this long. I mean, sorry, sexism as a problem. It took me this long to get here, and I'm going to do something to help. And she has, and it's been wonderful. And there's been a complete turnaround in the field. I mean, there's a long way to go, a huge amount of work to do. And, on an individual level and institutional level, women in conducting still face a lot of hurdles. And, we can't rest, we can't stop. But there have been a lot of strides made when a woman is appointed to a conducting position with an orchestra. There's a lot of celebration made of it. She gets a lot of exposure, and we need that. It's wonderful. So it's proven to me that orchestras can take an institutional problem like sexism and address it in a meaningful way. They can take action. So now they need to take the next step, and they need to admit that racism is a problem. Mm-hmm. They need to admit that the inclusiveness of Black and brown people, African Americans and Latinos, is an enormous problem, and that there is a way to address this. Mm-hmm. So I'm really looking forward to moving beyond these messages of solidarity posted on social media and starting to see orchestras announcing ambitious commissioning projects to commission new works by African American and Hispanic composers, to make sure that they're engaging more African American and Hispanics as guest conductors, programming more music by Black and brown composers, dead and alive, to really start taking action on the words that they've now promised publicly.
Yeah, I really hope so too. It's easy to sit and talk, or like I've been seeing so many people have been posting things on social media, like long letters of, just stating their own personal opinion on the current situations. But I'm not really sure how on any of this is helpful unless the people who are in power do take some action and provide some of these opportunities for people and truly show that sincerely they are talking about this, they are taking care of these situations, and something is moving forward and they are making a difference. But I don't know, we can sit and hope to see if anything is changing or not. But,
it's going to take a while to start seeing this translated into action, but I don't see how an institution which is committed to presenting the music of Beethoven and Shostakovich, and I use those two particular composers because Beethoven was the great humanitarian, mm-hmm. who chose the text of the Ode to Joy, Schiller's mm-hmm. great Ode to Humanity, and its message of universal brotherhood, which is both musical and box office darling, mm-hmm. With every orchestra in the world. And Shostakovich, who lived under the most severe political oppression, arguably of the 20th century in the Stalin regime, and yet managed to get a message of humanity, even under the microscope, out through his music. I mean, some of it's coded, but you listen to it, it's there, and there's a lot of bravery. And if an institution wants to be a vanguard of those traditions and wants to claim cultural and moral authority through the presenting of these works, the performance of these works, then there's no way they can stay silent or passive on this issue and still claim to have any sort of artistic credibility.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Well, let me move to my few last questions.
Oh, there's more, yes. I know I never have much to say. I'm very quiet.
Yeah, you seem like a very quiet person for sure. Who were you most inspired by for yourself and your art?
Well, my musical heroes have always included Beethoven, the brave, the immortal spirit, Bach, whose music transcends everything earthly and just contains everything, the perfect balance of spirituality and logic. Mozart, who is this great miracle and who shows us, who tells us what heaven is going to sound like. Schubert, who was so naive and kind and gentle and so brilliant. I mean, every measure of his music is sincere. Not that others aren't, but I mean, the particular naivete and sincerity and beauty of his music are just so sublime. Um, Mahler, who is a complicated figure and not without controversy, and yet his willingness to embrace all the world and to try and put it into music stood as a prophecy for the 20th and increasingly 21st century. And Shostakovich, who, despite censorship and oppression, managed to let humanity and the hopefulness of the human spirit shine through in defiance through his music.
Great. Awesome. What would be your recommendations for those people who just want to start making music or practicing music?
Just do it. Choose an instrument. If you used to play something and have let it, sit in the closet, gathering dust, pull it out, dust it off, and just start making music. One day of practice leads to another day of practice, leads to another, and you'll make progress. But just do it. Just make music, sing, listen to music. Just let it be part of your life.
Let it be part of your life. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the most important part, because there's so many people who start playing music, but then they stop. Whether it's guitar or like piano, anything. Maybe even they think this is the simplest instrument I can learn to play, so let's just buy one and start playing. They might go and get a few lessons, but then they just stop. But you're right, they have to make it part of their life. Can't just
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so if you could change anything for yourself, what would that be?
I'd wave a magic wand and give myself the career of my dreams. But at this point, I've learned and accepted that there are a lot of things which have nothing to do with talent, hard work, or musicality or anything else that are just beyond one's control, good or bad. And accepting that is not easy, but once one does, I just try and focus on what I can control, becoming a better musician every day, composing as much as possible, learning scores, and trying to be a good, decent human being in a complex and difficult world, and trying to bring music into the lives of as many people as I can in any way I can. I mean, if it's conducting Mahler, Beethoven at Carnegie Hall with the Vienna Philharmonic, that would be a dream. I'd love to do that. If it's conducting a Mozart symphony with a pickup orchestra in a church, little church somewhere out of the way, you just never know who's listening and who needs to hear that music at that time. So, or doing things like this, having conversations with people, talking about the art of conducting, composition, music history. If there's one person out there who decides they want to listen to a Beethoven symphony and never have before, after watching this and decide to and find some value in it, then I've accomplished something.
Absolutely right. If you had any superpowers, what would that be?
Oh, that's a good one. I say seeing the future, but that might be sad. I'm not sure.
You never know.
I'm
If you're looking at the history of humankind, we have progressed. Things have become better generally overall. So I don't think future will be worse than what we are experiencing right now.
I'd say things have gotten better, but they are proportional. That's the pessimist in me. The optimist in me says, well, we've learned more about our humanity, and we have less and less of an excuse to continue being inhumane to each other. So hopefully we won't see atrocities like the very obvious ones we saw in the 20th century and the last 4 or 5 centuries. And at least we can actively work towards preventing those things and standing up for justice whenever possible. don't always succeed, but at least more and more people are thinking about it and trying to do it, and that's progress.
Definitely. I agree with you. I absolutely do. Thank you so very much for accepting my invitation and coming to this live with me. The other day I was just watching your live on Facebook that you were reading a letter when
Hmm.
these things started happening, and I found it very powerful and moving. And I really wanted to talk to you. I'm like, I think I should talk to this person and find out more about him. And it was beautiful what you were sharing. And I want everyone who is watching us now or later to go and check out your social media pages. You have a very lovely Instagram page. There's
Thank you.
some music that you have shared on there. Where else our viewers can find your work?
I have a YouTube. If you search Conductor Joseph Jones or Joseph Jones Symphony, a bunch of my conducting videos pop up. Some of my composition pops up. My Facebook, my Instagram, and yeah, I think that's it right now.
Do you have a website too, or only just on social
I
media?
do. It's I'll have to post it because it's an old Wix site which really needs updating.
Oh, okay.
But I also have some of my links to YouTube on there.
Okay, awesome. I'll make sure that our viewers go and check out your works and pieces. And I'm sure that they would enjoy looking at them and listening to them.
I hope so.
All right, do you have any last comments, any last words you would like to add?
No, other than to say thank you so much for seeing the Facebook live video and thinking of me and inviting me to come and talk a little bit.
No, it was an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Same here.
Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we'll be in contact and talk to you more later.
I'm sure we will.
Okay, have a good day.
You too.
Thanks everyone who enjoyed or who joined us with this live. I hope that you watch it here now or later, and we will be with you tomorrow with another Instagram live. It will be in Persian with a writer. I don't remember her last name. I think Samira Hajipur. So please join us tomorrow as well. And yeah, looking forward to it. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.